On today's episode, we're out here in the mist taking a look at the recently refreshed 2017 Lincoln MKZ. You might be wondering where exactly the MKZ fits in the landscape, so let's talk about that first. The MKZ is a mid-sized luxury or near luxury sedan, depending on how exactly you want to classify this. That means that in terms of overall size, this is closer to something like a BMW 5 Series or a Mercedes-Benz E-Class, but its price tag is closer to the C-Class or 3 Series. This is a very similar formula to what we see going on in the Lexus ES 350 and the Acura TLX, which are probably the closest competitors to the MKZ. Of course, you could also quite easily compare this sedan to something like a Kia Cadenza or an Audi A4. Just like the Lexus ES 350 shares a great deal with the Toyota Avalon and the TLX shares a great deal with the Honda Accord, the Lincoln MKZ shares a great deal under the skin with the Ford Fusion. Now, if you ask me, family relations aren't terribly important as long as the family relations are good ones, and the Ford Fusion is a very good building block to start from. In order to help differentiate the Lincoln MKZ from the Fusion just a little bit more, we have an all-new front-end look. This grille is very similar to what we see in the brand new Lincoln Continental, and our model has the optional full LED headlamps. HID headlamps are standard, and these are full LED modules, LED low beams and LED high beams, and the low beams steer in the corner. At 193 inches long, the overall length of the MKZ is an important thing to keep in mind, because this is about the same length as the Lexus ES 350. That means, as I said earlier, this is actually closer in terms of length to the BMW 5 Series than the BMW 3 Series. The 3 Series is actually a full 10 inches shorter. This is also about 3 inches longer than an Acura TLX, but about 4 inches shorter than a Buick LaCrosse. So this is not quite in the same category that the LaCrosse is in. In the past, the Lincoln MKS was the vehicle that was likely cross-shopped against the Buick LaCrosse. But of course, now we have the Lincoln Continental, and this is a decent amount shorter than that brand new Lincoln. As seems to be the trend with modern sedans, we have a more coupe-like profile than we see in something like the Lexus ES 350, where we have this really long rear window glass and a relatively short trunk hood. This makes the side profile of the MKZ very sleek for sure, but it also reduces rear headroom. The rear has also been refreshed for 2017. We have these new tail lamp modules and these LED light strips that run all the way from one side of the vehicle to the other. Below the body painted section of the bumper, we have this black section of the bumper, and then we have twin exhaust tips on all models, including the hybrid. For the same base price, you can choose between a 245 horsepower 2-liter turbocharged engine or a 188 horsepower hybrid system, and the hybrid is the model we're driving right here. Obviously, the hybrid system is going to give you the highest base fuel economy, but the base 2-liter engine can be mated to an optional all-wheel drive system, and you can't get all-wheel drive with the hybrid. Of course, the real big news for 2017 is that we have an all-new 3-liter twin-turbo V6 available under this hood. Now, quite unusually, Lincoln is selling that engine in either front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive form. If you get the 400 horsepower version of that engine, it will send the MKZ from 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. If you get the hybrid model that we're driving this week, you get Ford and Lincoln's latest planetary gear set power split style hybrid transaxle. But if you choose the 2 or 3-liter turbocharged engines, then you get a Ford 6-speed automatic. You will notice that 6 speeds is a little bit behind the majority of the luxury competition, and that is noticeable both in the acceleration times and in the fuel economy score. The 3-liter twin turbo with all-wheel drive gets 20 miles per gallon combined. The 2-liter turbo gets 24 in its most efficient trim. If you're disappointed by that a little bit, then stay tuned because I do expect to see the brand new 9-speed automatic transmission from Ford under this hood at some time in the future. I'm going to give front seat comfort 9 out of 10 points in the top-end model that we're driving right here. In addition to the optional power tilt telescopic steering column, our vehicle also has the optional multi-contour seats. The multi-contour seats use a series of air bladders in the seat back and in the seat bottom cushion to give you a wider range of adjustability in terms of the lumbar support, the general contour of the seat back. In addition to that, we have a massage and anti-fatigue function. This is a little bit different than what we saw in the Cadillac CT6 recently, because although the Cadillac CT6 had a better back massage function, it only massaged the back. This seat has an anti-fatigue seat bottom cushion. It actually has several bladders in the seat bottom itself. It inflates them and deflates them in a pattern in order to help improve leg circulation. That makes these seats much more comfortable on long car trips. Now, one thing I will point out for taller drivers is that the seat bottom cushion is fairly short and it doesn't have a thigh extension. Now, I'm 6 feet tall and the back of my calf is a good 3 to 4 inches away from the seat bottom cushion. That means that some vehicles in this segment will be a little bit more appropriate for taller folks. Rear passenger accommodations are one of the big reasons that you might want to buy an MKZ over something like a Cadillac ATS, because I have significantly more legroom sitting right here behind myself. With a combined front and rear legroom figure of 78.8 inches, we have 1 inch more room in this vehicle than the Acura TLX, about 2 inches more than the brand new and much larger Audi A4, and several inches more than something like a Cadillac ATS. In terms of overall legroom, this is actually more similar to a BMW 5 Series. If I move all the way over to the right seat, this front seat is all the way back at its track, suitable for a 6'5" passenger I had in the car. I still have about an inch of legroom left. Even though we're driving the hybrid model of the MKZ, we still have a 60/40 folding rear seat back, and we have a much larger trunk pass-through than you see in the average hybrid in this segment. In fact, compared to the non-hybrid MKZ, that cargo opening back there is only about 2 inches shorter. Every hybrid has a battery, and that battery has to go somewhere. In the MKZ, that somewhere is right here in the trunk. That means that instead of 15 cubic feet of storage space like you find in the 2-liter or 3-liter turbo versions, we find 11.1 cubic feet of storage space in this hybrid model. Because of the overall shape of the trunk, we were able to fit 4 of these 24-inch roller bags back here. That's one more than I thought this vehicle would fit. It all has to do with the way this trunk is shaped and the fact that you can actually put light items right here, like this empty 24-inch roller bag, right back there on top of the battery. On the downside, the somewhat eccentric shape of this cargo area means that you can just barely fit a 24-inch roller bag right here and still close the trunk lid, but you can't do it over here on the driver's side of the cargo area. You can very easily put them right down here in the middle, however. If we lift up the load floor in the trunk, you won't find a spare tire under here. Instead, we have a can of Fix-A-Flat and some additional storage. You might be somewhat surprised to find that this trunk scores 8 out of 10 points in our exclusive Trunk Comfort Index. The reason for this is that we see exactly the same kind of cubic foot reduction in the Lexus ES 350 to the Lexus hybrid model. However, we get a much less useful trunk pass-through in the Lexus. In addition to that, even though an 11 cubic foot trunk is a little on the small side for the average mid-size sedan, this is only 2 cubic feet smaller than the Acura TLX, and that's not a hybrid. There's also a very nice handle on the inside of the trunk to help you close it if you don't get the optional power trunk lid. A quick note to Ford is that I do wish they'd put this 12-volt battery that's over here on the side of the cargo area and consumes a great deal of space. I wish they'd put that under the cargo area load floor where it wouldn't have taken up quite so much room. As we take a look around the interior, keep in mind that we are in one of the upper end trims, but we are not in the black label trim. The front seats get 4-way adjustable headrests. They move up and down and then they ratchet forward right like that. As I said earlier, the model that we are driving has the optional multi-contour seats, so these seats are heated, they are ventilated, they massage, and they have an anti-fatigue function. As you'd expect from a luxury vehicle, the majority of the front door is made from a soft touch plastic. So we have the soft touch injection molded upper that is then after stitched to give it the impression of stitched material. Same thing goes for this middle section and the armrest. We even have soft touch plastics lower on the front door, although you will find a little bit of hard plastic right here around the speaker grills. As I said before, we are not driving the black label trim. If we were, then we would get a stitched leather dashboard and stitched leather doors. Moving over to the dashboard, we find the same soft touch material that we found on the upper portion of the doors. Real wood trim, metallic trim right there. And then we have a large glove compartment that is a combination bin style and slot style glove compartment. I was able to fit a large tablet computer inside. As with most luxury vehicles, the soft touch materials are not restricted to just the upper portion of the dashboard. So the sides of the center console and the lower portions of the dashboard are all soft touch material as well. The dashboard styling is very distinctive. We have that center channel speaker because again, we have the optional Revel audio system. And then on either side of this touchscreen infotainment system, we have a row of buttons. On the left side, we find the engine start stop button and the transmission mode selector buttons. So park, reverse, neutral, drive, and low. Logically, if you want to shift the vehicle into drive, we simply press down on the brake pedal and hit this D button. It will then move to drive. If we want reverse, we press the R button. Of course, if we want to park the car, we can just hit the P button, or you can actually turn the vehicle off and it will automatically park itself. Between the 2 rows of buttons, we have the touchscreen Sync 3 infotainment system, which now supports Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. If you want to know more about this infotainment system, there is a separate video on my channel just about this that you can go check out. Sync 3 is the replacement for the MyLincoln Touch system, and it is definitely snappier than the system that it replaces. This is where you'll find the controls for the multi-contour seats. The multi-contour seats allow you to adjust the 3 different zones of the lumbar support independently of one another. We can also adjust the bolstering for the seat bottom cushion or the seat back cushion. The massage tab allows us to adjust the back massage and the seat bottom cushion massage independently of one another as well. Below the infotainment system, we find a single slot optical disc player, volume and tune, of course, power, track forward, backward, source button right there. Then we find the controls for the 2-zone climate control system. Temperature is adjusted via the toggles on either side, and of course we have a full auto mode. We You'll also find the controls for the ventilated seats, and the heated steering wheel. Behind door number 1, we find a single USB input and a slot where you can put your smartphone, iPod, or other music device very easily. The slot is not quite deep enough to put the entire iPhone because there is a storage compartment right here under the center console as well. Between the front seats, we have a softly padded center armrest. This opens to reveal a large storage compartment where we find an additional USB input, 12-volt power outlet, small storage shelf right there, and definitely enough room to put wallets, smartphones, keys, that sort of thing. The 2-tiered storage area under the center console has enough room for small purses, wallets, iPhones, that sort of thing, and then there is another small storage area right there behind the climate controls. The MKZ features 2 different LCD instrument clusters. Because we're driving the hybrid model, we get the one with the 2 4.2-inch LCDs on either side of a physical speedometer. If you get the 2-liter or 3-liter turbo version of the MKZ, then we see essentially the same 10.3-inch LCD instrument cluster that we found in the V6 edition before the refresh. Back in the hybrid model, the left gauge is where you'll find the battery gauge, the fuel economy gauge, this gauge that shows us how much power the engine and the motor are delivering to propel the vehicle forward. There are also a few alternate views to give you that same information. We can also get trip computer information and tire pressure monitoring. This display is also where you would adjust certain vehicle settings like enabling or disabling the traction control, turning on and off the grade assist, and adjusting the dynamic suspension system that we have in this vehicle. Personally, I find this a little bit less convenient than adjusting the suspension system with buttons on the dashboard, but we do have the choice between sport, normal, and comfort. The LCD on the right side is where we find our distance to empty range, temperature outside. We also have entertainment, phone, navigation information, as well as fuel economy information. You'll notice that fuel economy information is available on both sides of the screen in the hybrid model. We also have a driving coach to tell you how well you're accelerating, braking, cruising, etc. And we have Ford's efficiency leaves display. Moving out from there, we find a 3-spoke steering wheel with a leather-wrapped airbag cover and real wood trim on the bottom spoke. The 4-way button module on the left controls the LCD on the left side of the speedometer. The one over here on the right controls the LCD on the right side of the speedometer. Below that, we have some infotainment controls, volume up, down, mute, track forward, backward. And then on the left side, we have the controls for the radar adaptive cruise control system. As part of the refresh, Lincoln has replaced the stalks on either side of the steering wheel with this new design. Acceleration obviously varies a great deal depending on the engine that you select. The hybrid model that we're driving is the slowest at 7.8 seconds 0 to 60. If you get the other base engine option, which is the 2-liter turbocharged engine, you'll run from 0 to 60 in 7.2. If you're wondering why there isn't a larger difference between the 2-liter turbo and this 2-liter hybrid system, the 6-speed automatic transmission is the biggest reason for that. The hybrid is quite efficient as far as acceleration goes. We have a decent amount of torque out of this engine, and on the 2-liter turbo side, we have a 6-speed automatic, which is a few gears behind the competition. So even though we get about the same kind of power out of this 2-liter 4-cylinder as we do out of some of the German options, those German options typically have 8-speed automatics, and they're going to go faster 0 to 60. However, the base 2-liter engine is notably faster 0 to 60 than the Acura TLX with its base 4-cylinder engine, mainly because it's not turbocharged. Of course, the most exciting engine available in the MKZ is the all-new 3-liter twin-turbo V6, and that will get you from 0 to 60 in 4.8 seconds, which is very quick. That's much quicker than the Acura TLX with its V6 engine, but it's not quite as fast as a BMW 340i. Still, 4.8 seconds is very respectable for this segment, and you'd need something like a Cadillac CTS V Sport in order to beat this in the CTS line. You'd also need to get something like the Lexus GSF if you wanted a Lexus GS that's this fast 0 to 60. Stopping distances are very impressive regardless of the engine that you get under the hood. We went from 60 miles an hour back to 0 in 110 feet, which is very short for this segment. That's thanks to the wide 245 width tires that we get even on this hybrid trim. When it comes to handling, I'm going to give this an A-. The MKZ handles very well, but it's a little bit difficult to say what this compares to, especially when you start taking a look at that 3-liter turbocharged version. Now obviously, the hybrid that we're driving really only directly competes with the Lexus ES 350 hybrid because it's the only hybrid front-wheel drive vehicle in this particular segment, but the rest of the MKZ lineup does compete with a wide variety of options. You can see it as the value alternative to a BMW 3 Series, and because of the overall size of the vehicle, it's also logical to compare this to a Cadillac CTS, perhaps a Lexus GS or a Jaguar XF, and of course again as a value alternative to a BMW 5 Series. How you rank the MKZ in terms of handling really varies based on what you're trying to compare it to. This is obviously not going to be a dynamic equal to something like a BMW 340i or the Cadillac CTS or the Lexus GS, which have excellent handling feel and excellent handling dynamics. However, in terms of absolute road holding, this is not that far behind. On the flip side, this definitely holds the road better than a Lexus ES, an Acura TLX, a Kia Cadenza, something along those lines. In a way, because the MKZ is available with all-wheel drive in the 2-liter turbo and the 3-liter turbo engine, and because of the overall price and overall size of the MKZ, this finds itself caught somewhere between those two worlds, where the Cadenza and the Lexus ES live, and where something like a BMW 3 Series lives. The MKZ reminds me a great deal of the Audi A4 and Audi A6 out on the road, also some Volvo models. That's because we do have a front heavy weight distribution. So this has more weight up front, and that means when you start entering corners, you start pushing the car harder, it's not going to be as willing to turn in as some of the rear-wheel drive competition. However, the chassis is excellently designed, and if you opt for the all-wheel drive system, you do get a torque vectoring axle in that 3-liter twin-turbo model, and that really does help improve the MKZ in terms of power on performance. Now, power off, you're going to still get that a little bit unwillingness to turn, but power on in the corners, it's definitely going to feel like a different animal. That same sort of feeling is exactly what goes on in the latest Audi models, because they're also fairly front-heavy for the luxury car segment. Out here on gravel roads, it's obvious that even in the softest suspension mode of the MKZ, this is an awful lot firmer than Lincolns of the past. That really shouldn't be too much of a surprise because, of course, the European market Ford Mondeo is closely related to the MKZ, and that has a very European, very Germanic-like ride to it. When it comes to cabin noise, I'm going to give this a B because we did score 70 decibels at 50 miles an hour. That makes us a little bit louder than some of the averages in the segment, whether you're talking about the Lexus ES segment or the BMW 3 Series segment. That's likely because of the large tires that we have on this model, again 245 with tires. The large tires are also why our fuel economy score has not been as exciting as it could be. A tire's contact patch, and that's the amount of the tire that's actually touching the road at any one moment, has a huge impact, of course, on braking, on acceleration, on handling, and on the vehicle's ride, but also on the vehicle's fuel efficiency, because the more tire that's touching the road, the more friction that we have. And that's why we've been averaging between 35 and 36 miles per gallon, and not the 40 miles per gallon that the EPA says you should be getting in the MKZ. There are a wide variety of reasons why the EPA's fuel economy scores can be a little bit off in vehicles, and I will let you explore all those fun reasons online, but suffice it to say, the wide tires that we find in this vehicle mean it's going to be pretty hard to get that 40 mile per gallon score in average driving, I'd say. If you do an awful lot of 55 mile an hour country highway driving, then you may be able to get the 40 mile per gallon score. However, in my daily driving and in the freeway runs that we did, we just weren't able to hit it. The trade-off for the fuel economy is, of course, the fun-to-drive factor, and this is much more fun to drive than a Lexus ES hybrid or a Toyota Avalon hybrid, or actually even comparably priced German hybrids. The key phrase there, of course, was comparably priced, not comparably equipped, and that brings us right along to the pricing. For 2017, the MKZ starts at $35,170. It's important to remember that you can get that base Premier trim in either the 2-liter turbocharged version or the 2-liter hybrid version. That's very different than the other luxury hybrids or near luxury hybrids, which generally command a premium over the base engine option. Now, if you choose the 2-liter turbocharged engine under the hood of your MKZ, you can add all-wheel drive for $1,890, even in the base trim. The base trim is very well equipped. We get HID headlamps, not the LED headlamps that we saw on our model, 12-way power seats with 2-way adjustable lumbar support. The front seats are heated. We get dual-zone climate control, the standard Sync 3 infotainment system, standard adaptive suspension, and standard active noise cancellation. But we don't get leather upholstery. And that's where the Select trim comes in at $36,920 starting. This really is the realistic base price for the MKZ. The Select trim is where you find 4-way adjustable lumbar support, real leather upholstery, access to additional options, because in the base trim you can't really add options. We also get ambient lighting, the power tilt telescopic steering column, and most importantly, the ability to option up into the 3-liter twin turbocharged 6-cylinder engine. Now, if you get the 3-liter turbocharged engine, then you do get 350 horsepower by default, 400 horsepower if you opt for the $3,140 all-wheel drive system. You'll notice that all-wheel drive is more expensive on the 6-cylinder than the 4-cylinder. The biggest reason for that difference is that the 3-liter turbocharged engine gets a torque vectoring rear axle, more similar to Acura's super handling all-wheel drive system, and you don't get that on the 2-liter turbo. Black Label is what Lincoln is calling their top-end trim line these days, and you can get any of the 3 engines in the Black Label form. Black Label adds features like the Alcantara headliner, standard 20-speaker Revel audio system, along with unique interior touches that give you a little bit more ability to customize your vehicle than you would in the other trim lines. Black Label also gives you a different buying experience. Someone actually comes out to your house or to your place of business to go over your features and functions if that's of any value to you. But the biggest things that we get that are not features are the extended maintenance coverage to 4 years and 50,000 miles. That covers things like oil changes, windshield wipers, that sort of thing. You also get free annual detailing and free car washes. So if you want to wash your Black Label Lincoln, you just take it into the dealer and they'll wash it for you. If you check all of the option boxes on a Black Label vehicle with the 3-liter turbocharged engine and all-wheel drive, you'll end up just under $62,000 before destination. Before we dive right into comparisons, let's talk about the Ford Fusion. A lot of you on Facebook were asking how the MKZ compares with the Ford Fusion. Is it a worthwhile upgrade? Now personally, I find it interesting that more people ask about the Ford versus Lincoln matchup than the Toyota versus Lexus matchup. Now on the other hand, I think it's perfectly rational to wonder exactly what kind of a luxury upgrade you get when you move from the Fusion into the MKZ. If you were to try and comparably equip a Ford Fusion to a base Lincoln MKZ, it would end up between $4,800 and $5,000 less expensive than the base price on the Lincoln. However, the Lincoln has about $2,000 more standard equipment. And that's before we even start taking into account the included maintenance that we find, very much like we see over in BMW's vehicles, that gives you oil changes, windshield wiper changes, etc., for 2 years and 24,000 miles. In addition to that, the Lincoln has a longer standard warranty than the Ford Fusion. Depending on how much you value the extended maintenance and the longer warranty, and perhaps some of the brand experience that we get with the Lincoln, they're going to end up essentially the same price. So I would argue that as far as value goes, it's a better value to buy the Lincoln MKZ in base form than the top-end trims of the Ford Fusion. Not only do you get a more unique vehicle with a more luxury-oriented brand name, but you also get a better quality interior than we find in the Ford Fusion. Now let's take a look at the Lexus ES 350. The ES has long been the benchmark for this category. It starts at $38,900, which is $3,000 more than the Lincoln. For that base price, you don't get to choose your engine. It's just the naturally aspirated V6 engine. And it's really not any faster 0 to 60 than the 2-liter turbo in the MKZ. If you're shopping for a hybrid, as about 25% of this segment seems to be, then it's going to cost you $6,000 more over in the Lexus than in the Lincoln. If you want more power in your Lexus, you're going to have to choose a different Lexus model, because the ES 350 is the most powerful version of the ES. That means that there really is no direct Lexus competition for the 3-liter turbocharged engine we find in the MKZ. I suppose you could consider that competition to the Lexus GS, but the GS is going to be significantly more expensive. It's not really going to be any faster. The Lexus and the Lincoln are both very comfortable and easy to live with, but over on the Lexus side, I have often said that the interior in the Toyota Avalon strikes me as a little bit more premium in some areas than the Lexus, and that's true for the 2017 model as well. So if I were looking for the best interior in this segment, it would be the MKZ over the Lexus ES. The important thing to remember about the Lexus ES is that it can get quite expensive. It can get almost as expensive as the MKZ, but you're still talking about that same base engine, and no all-wheel drive system is available. Therefore, if you're looking at the Lexus ES, you could get an MKZ with more features or more power under the hood for less than you could the Lexus. While the Lexus is notably more expensive than the Lincoln, the Kia Cadenza is notably less expensive than the Lincoln. It starts at $31,990, and the most expensive version of the Cadenza is $44,390. This undercuts the Lincoln by a decent margin. Now, there's no hybrid system available in the Cadenza, and the handling is a semi-step below the MKZ in front-wheel drive trim as well. The all-wheel drive system that we find in the MKZ, especially the optional torque vectoring all-wheel drive system, is a big differentiator between it and the rest of the competition. Still, the Kia Cadenza is an absolutely excellent value in this segment. The first Kia Cadenza, I think, was really a shot across the bow in this near luxury segment because it had excellent value when compared to the Acura RLX, the Acura TLX, the Lexus ES, etc., and a very low sticker price. The 2017 Kia Cadenza is a slightly different animal because the new Cadenza has really pushed the refinement of the interior and some of the options to the next level. In terms of base performance, the Cadenza also fares quite well thanks to a brand new 8-speed automatic transmission, but it's definitely not going to be as fast as the twin-turbo 3-liter 6-cylinder that we find in the Lincoln. The next direct competitor we have is the Acura TLX. It starts at $32,000, which seems like a very good buy until you consider that gets you a 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine only. Now that 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine is not going to be that much slower than the 2-liter turbo that we find in the MKZ, but in our tests it was still a little bit behind. Fuel economy is quite good in the base TLX, but but it's not as good as the Lincoln MKZ Hybrid. If you want the V6 under the hood of your TLX, that'll set you back $35,460, and the V6 is very quick in the TLX. That's because it has a 9-speed automatic. The 9-speed automatic transmission gives you a very, very low first gear for an excellent 5.4 second 0 to 60. However, it doesn't get you the super handling all-wheel drive system by default. You'd have to pay $41,700 for that. That means if you're looking for all-wheel drive, it's definitely going to be less expensive in the MKZ. The ZF 9-speed automatic has been a little bit of a mixed bag. You probably ought to drive one for a while to make sure you like the way that it shifts or can live with the way that it shifts, because it is a little bit unusual compared to every other automatic transmission out there. You'll definitely find more luxury options available in the MKZ, more ability to customize the MKZ than the TLX. It also feels a little bit more premium than the TLX, especially in the upper end trims. Remember that we can get features like the stitched leather dashboard, the leather airbag cover, stitched leather doors, etc., and more ability to customize your color palettes than you'll find in the Acura. Last up, we have the Audi A4 and Audi A6. The reason we're talking about both the A4 and the A6 at the same time is that the MKZ is really not a direct A4 competitor, and it's not a direct A6 competitor either. It's sort of in between. The MKZ is obviously closer to the A6 in terms of overall size than the A4, but the price tag is a little bit closer to the A4 than the A6. The A4 starts at $34,990 for 2017. The A6 starts at $47,600. That means that depending on how you want to compare them, the MKZ could be about the same price or a little bit less expensive than the A4 when you comparably equip it. The A4 and the MKZ offer approximately the same kind of luxury touches on the inside, luxury features, luxury options, and ability to customize the vehicle. However, the A4 is notably smaller than the MKZ, and that's why, again, it's not really a direct A4 competitor. If, however, we were to take a look at an Audi A6, the A6 would be significantly more expensive than the MKZ, but its rear seat area is a little bit more comfortable. We offer more luxury options, and that's really why the TLX, the Cadenza, the MKZ, and the ES350 end up put in a category all to their own. Because the same sort of thing goes on when you try and take a look at a Mercedes-Benz C-Class or an E-Class or a BMW 3 Series and a BMW 5 Series versus the MKZ. The MKZ tends to fall somewhere in between. My top pick in this very small segment is the 2017 Kia Cadenza. Spanning between about $32,000 and $44,000, it is an incredible buy. Now, the handling in the Cadenza is not quite as good as the MKZ, and there's no hybrid available, but performance does slot somewhere between the front-wheel drive 3-liter twin-turbo engine and the 2-liter turbo engine in the Lincoln. Overall feature and gadget content in the Cadenza is very, very good, and that's why it is an incredible value in this particular segment. The caveat here is that in order to get the excellent value proposition we find in the Kia, they've had to really whittle down the options. So there are really only 3 ways you can get your Kia. There are 3 different trim levels, essentially no standalone options, and choosing an exterior color often dictates an interior color, so you have less ability to customize the vehicle. Performance slots somewhere between the 2-liter turbocharged engine and the 3-liter turbocharged engine in the Lincoln. The MKZ is my choice in this segment over the TLX and the Lexus ES350 quite easily, and I would actually say I might even buy it over an Audi A4. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2017 Lincoln MKZ. Be sure and stay tuned for a full review on the 3-liter turbocharged engine when we can get our hands on one. Until that time, find us over at patreon.com. You can also check us out at facebook.com/AlexNautos. I'll see you next week.